Hello and welcome to Biz1st Review 360, your weekly roundup of the top business stories that impact the economy. I am Chaturanga Hapuarachi. After much criticism and pressure from civil society and the corporate sector, the ban on social media was lifted yesterday following a discussion with Facebook. Facebook was slammed for its failure to act on hate speech that allegedly fueled unrest in the Hill capital. How the ban impacted businesses and the economy will be the topic for much debates in the weeks to come. Later on in the show, we will be joined by the former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank, Dr. W.A. Vijayawardena, to discuss the direction of the economy in the wake of the unrest, political uncertainty and the IMF staff level review ahead of the fifth tranche. Now a look at a review of this week's top stories.
The Airline Pilots Guild of Sri Lanka has written to the President seeking his urgent attention to the serious ongoing mismanagement of the troubled national carrier. While welcoming the President's decision to appoint a commission of inquiry into the operation of the airline, the Guild has revealed that 3 newly leased narrow-body aircraft have been grounded due to the loss of a critical operational certification issued by the Civil Aviation Authority. The Guild says the loss of certification has resulted in flight cancellations and disruptions, adding further to the unprecedented losses suffered by the national carrier. The Airline Pilots Guild of Sri Lanka says it has no confidence in the CEO or the Board of Management to resolve the matter. The letter, which is also copied to the Prime Minister, Ministers, Treasury Secretary and Chairman of COPE, urges the President not to allow the present management to make changes to existing routes or organisation structure until a competent CEO and Board of Directors are appointed to the national carrier.
Terminal operators of the Colombo Port, the Jaya Container Terminal, the South Asia Gateway Terminal and the Colombo International Container Terminal signed a Memorandum of Understanding to increase efficiency and to collectively promote the image of the Port of Colombo. The aim of the agreement is to ensure a quick turnaround time for clients.
You have instances where some of the berths are idle. Whilst the berths are being idle, that you have ships outside, which does not send the right message. So the whole purpose of this MOU is to ensure that we try and share our resources to ensure that we provide the clients who are here the best possible services. We can't have a situation of a ship idling out when we have an idle berth inside the Port of Colombo. And as we all know, on the Asia to Europe sector, there are 17 loops, and of which only 3 are calling Colombo. So obviously we have got challenges to ensure that collectively we attract more loops into the Port of Colombo. So which means that we need to go beyond the partisan approach of promoting our terminal and go beyond that to protect the goose that is the Port of Colombo that lays the golden eggs.
Port officials say competition for transshipment business is growing in the region and it is essential that Colombo project the ability to handle more cargo.
Colombo has a unique position of being a major regional hub in the last 2 to 3 decades. But it also has a unique selling point of having 3 independent terminal operators, which no other hub in the region has. The only regional the Southeast Asian region hub doesn't have anyone, but in Hong Kong we have multiple operators as a multiple hub. So that was another unique feature of Colombo. But today what we have done is we are using our main selling point, which was the strategic location. Now we are synergizing that by getting the 3 terminal operators to project the Port of Colombo as one unit. And this will add a tremendous impetus to take Colombo to a new level. And CICT, being backed by China Merchants, the world's second largest global terminal operator, we can rest assured that we use everything within our forces to take Colombo to the next level.
We have to do this in the context that Colombo does compete regionally for the business that we have. We are very dependent on transshipment cargo. That dependence is only going to increase over the years ahead, and it is therefore essential that we project the ability of Colombo to handle more and more cargo as the east-west, main east-west trades, which is the major trade in the world, continues to grow.
State Minister of National Policies and Economic Affairs Dr. Harsha De Silva said that the government is looking to launch a new innovation and entrepreneurship strategy for 2018 and 2022 in a bid to improve the doing business climate.
We are also following the new innovation and entrepreneurship strategy of Sri Lanka 2018-2022. I don't want to bore you, but the three main objectives are that what Indy was talking about. Exports are not of high skill and capital intensive. We want to change that. Second objective is to build an ecosystem for scaling growth-oriented startups. And one of the things in there is allowing limited liability partnerships. And third is to modernize and realign the R&D sector. We are taking steps to directly address the gap in financing, mentoring and network building between startups, larger companies, supply chains and markets.
He made these remarks addressing the launch of Sri Lanka's first integrated entrepreneurship platform, Venture Frontier Lanka.
We are striving to have a better doing business climate. Many changes are being done. By 31st March, we are attempting to meet some of the tough targets. I have been given the responsibility about 2 months ago, 1.5 months ago, to try and accelerate this exercise. And I'm hopeful that by the next doing business survey, we'll be able to go up a number of notches. Also, we are introducing education reforms that will encourage innovation and risk-taking. In our new 13 years education program, I don't know whether you've heard this before, we are introducing 26 applied subjects after O-level. If you don't sort of drop out, no need to drop out because you can stick around and get yourself educated on 26 applied subjects. Things like event management. Whoever thought that you could study event management in school? Look at this, these guys are making lots of money. It is good business. Weddings, events, event management, construction studies, textile and apparel studies, software development, 26 new areas of study. So you can, and also what we are going to do is for half year, business English. How do you communicate? How do you write a letter? Things of that nature. So we want to use our schools to change mindsets, to promote and celebrate entrepreneurs across the country.
Stay tuned. When we come back, a discussion on the current political climate and its impact on the economic reforms. Welcome back. You are watching Biz1st Review 360. Former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank, Dr. W.A. Vijayawardena, joins us to discuss the challenges facing the economy in the wake of recent developments. Charita, over to you.
Thank you, Chaturanga. Dr. Vijayawardena, thank you for joining Biz1st Review 360. I would like to start by asking you, when you look back at the political unrest we saw in the Hill capital and also the political uncertainty triggered after the local government polls, the uncertainty, what do you think is the impact on the overall economy? What is the economic cost?
Charita, even before the local polls and the unrest in the hill country, Sri Lanka's economy was not doing well, and we had experienced a downward trend in the economic growth, which from about say 4.8% in 2015 when the government took over the power, and we ended up with 3.9 in 2017 last year. And the central bank had already taken action to stabilize the macroeconomy by bringing down the inflation rate and also trying to fix the problems with the country's external sector by getting funds from outside Sri Lanka by issuing sovereign bonds in the international markets. Now with that particular coming back to normalcy, both the local government polls and the unrest in the hill country has derailed the central bank's program of stabilizing the economy today. So what we are seeing today is that we are actually moving backward, and as a result the IMF has already projected that the country's economic growth for 2018 would be around 4.4%, and we may not be able to even realize that economic growth because of the uncertainty and the economic cost of the ethnic crisis that we have created by ourselves.
Is there any chance that the government could fast track some of the economic reforms in this backdrop?
That is, of course, the government has to do it, but of course you will remember, Charita, that immediately after they came to power, the first 100 days were spent on having a program to win the subsequent parliamentary elections, and they got the power in August 2015, and from August 2015 until IMF came to Sri Lanka to give us this extended fund facility in June 2016, there was no any attempt at introducing any economic reforms in the country. And there are 6 pillars of economic reforms which the government has agreed with IMF to introduce in terms of the extended fund facility. Even they have been able to, in the words of the IMF itself, to attain certain targets with respect to the budget of the government. All other targets like reform in the state-owned enterprises, and introducing inflation targeting for central bank's monetary policy framework, then maintaining a flexible exchange rate in the country, Sri Lanka has not been able to maintain any of those things. So given the current, because all these economic reforms are very painful, and we already have seen that the losses accumulated by Sri Lankan Airlines, even after Sri Lanka had gone into this IMF extended fund facility arrangement, had been now mounting, and there has not been any kind of a reform in any of the state enterprises which had been earning losses in the past. So given the current position of the government, that it has to face another election when the provincial council elections are held in this year, then year 2019 presidential election, 2020 parliamentary elections, those are not fertile ground for any governments to introduce painful economic reforms. So what I would feel is that government might just postpone the reform program. When it postpones the reform program, as IMF has also warned, we will not be able to attain a sustainable long-term economic growth in the country.
Is there any possibility for the IMF to withhold the 5th tranche on the government's failure to implement this pricing formula?
They had done it in the past, but of course I think given the current situation, IMF will not go to that extent, because one reason is Sri Lanka is a member of the International Monetary Fund. Then they have a responsibility to protect Sri Lanka. They have a responsibility to prevent Sri Lankan economy from moving backward. So because of these reasons, they may have to hold on to the current extended fund facility program. So my guess is that with some additional conditions, they will actually release the balance part of the extended fund facility, but it would give wrong signal to government, and government might think that even without doing economic reforms, the government can continue to hold on to power in Sri Lanka. So that's a very bad signal that would be given to government by IMF.
Now, given the concerns that you raised, Dr. Wijewardena, if the government, puts on hold different economic reforms in view of political stability or survival, or even the elections in future, what are the long-term implications on the Sri Lankan economy?
The long-term implications, now you would have noted, Charita, we are losing the competitiveness of Sri Lanka day by day. Then when it came to the business confidence index that was being compiled by a private party in Sri Lanka, we had declined from a very high of 140 level to 120 level today, and business confidence is the lowest. So with that, we don't have a very favorable environment for investments to take place. So if the investments are not there, we can't have a hope of having the long-term economic growth. So what we are actually doing is we are trading the long-term economic growth for short-term political expedience in the country today.
Now, going back to the unrest we saw in the hill capital, there was a lot of damage on property, and also the political uncertainty because of the local government poll result. What is the message it is conveying to investors? Now, the Chamber of Commerce also had raised concerns that it could affect investors that are already in the pipeline in discussion with BOI. What are immediate concerns?
Immediate concerns is that it has frightened both the local and the foreign investors, Charita, because the role of the government in any country today is to protect the property rights. So that means if I invest my money in any enterprises, I must be assured that my money is safe. But if some hooligans can come and burn down my property at their will and with total impunity, there is no any reason for me to think of investing my money. So it has already frightened them. So the biggest damage that has been done is the to the investment culture of the country, that it has made the property rights unsafe in Sri Lanka. So no local or foreign investor would invest in such a country because they know that our money is not safe. So as a result, we cannot expect the investors to come back and do the much needed investments in the country, because our problem, Charita, is that we are not saving enough to invest back in Sri Lanka. Because if we earn say 100 rupees in Sri Lanka, we always consume about 20 rupees and we save only about 20. We consume about 80 rupees and save only about 20 rupees, and that is not sufficient. For us to maintain an economic growth of say more than 7% in the long run, we must have an investment ratio of about 30% and above. So there's a gap. So that gap has to be filled by investors who would come from abroad. So if we are frightening them away, what would happen is we are not getting their investments, and as a result we will not be able to attain this high economic growth which the government is planning to attain.
Now, looking back at how the government handled the situation in the hill capital, do you think that it was a complete failure on the part of law enforcement, or were there other reasons that the government couldn't contain the issue?
No, they could have done it, Charita, because the kind of hate speeches that had been delivered by a small minority segment of the majority Sinhala Buddhist population had been there all throughout. And government has always, the present laws of the government are quite sufficient to address them and to tackle all these people who are spreading those hate speeches. So if the things had not been done at that level, what happened was it was allowed to come to a boiling point. At the boiling point, now it has exploded in the hill country, and fortunately government had been able to contain it only to hill country. But if it spreads to the rest of the island, then it will be a catastrophic for Sri Lanka, because we already have very bad experience of going through this 30-year war, and in that war our economic growth had been reduced by about 2% every year. And as a result, it had prevented us from becoming a rich nation within a single generation. So what is happening today is that if we permit another ethnic crisis to hit us at this particular point of time, we will have to sacrifice our future economic growth also.
On that note, we take a short commercial break. On the other side, the direction of the economy amidst challenges in the future. Welcome back. You're watching Biz1st Review 360, and we are joined by the former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank, Dr. W. Vijayawardena. Dr. Vijayawardena, I would like to continue the discussion by asking you on how you think the government dealt with the situation in Kandy. There was a blockade on social media. Some can argue that it was to curb the spread of violence, but it prolonged for about more than 10 days, I think. What is the impact on businesses and the economy?
First of all, Charita, the government's overreaction to blocking social media is totally unwarranted, because they are thinking in terms of an analog mind in a digital world. Because everybody has already noticed that even when you block the social media, that will not be effective, because there are other alternative ways of accessing and also spreading these things through the blocked social platforms of the government. So now what has actually happened is it's an overreaction, and now social media is being used by businesses in Sri Lanka, specifically small and medium scale businesses, to promote their marketing. And when you block it for even for 10 days, what would happen is their business activities are already disrupted. And if we continue for a longer period, that would have been catastrophic for all these small businesses. So my suggestion is that since the government has all the facilities to track down the people who had sinned through the social media and bring them before the courts of law, instead of doing that, if they have punished all the people in the country who had used the social media, the government has done a wrong thing. Also, in the social media, Charita, what I have noted was there was this small minority segment which had spread the hate speeches, but as I said, there's a large number of people who had actually fought against those people. Now when you have blocked the social media completely, you have silenced that group also. So therefore, I think in the future what the government should do is, instead of resorting to this type of say universal blockage, they should have actually targeted the people who had done wrong and then taken them to the courts, and then you can have solved the entire problem there.
Now, if you look at the hospitality sector, that is one sector that was immediately impacted by the problem in Kandy. There were cancellations, then there were travel advisories by the US, UK and Australia. How do you think the hospitality industry can, repair this damage?
No, it will happen, Charita. Gradually it will come back to normalcy, because I also know several people who had already planned to travel to Sri Lanka during this period, they cancelled it. But after some time, 1 or 2 months time, the things will come back to normalcy and the hotel sector would be able to perform at the normal level. But what matters to us is, if it happens every day in a country like Sri Lanka, then people will get frightened, and we don't have the long term plan for getting the tourists to Sri Lanka and promoting our tourism sector, because we think that we have to now concentrate on the services rather than on the goods exported by Sri Lanka, and we are actually denying that particular opportunity for Sri Lankan businesses.
Dr. Vijayawardena, another problem in our economy is the lack of skilled labor. We've seen people migrating to greener pastures. Do you think that trend will increase with this kind of activity happening?
In fact, it will happen, Charita, because people have already found, young people have already found that Sri Lanka is not a good place for them to live and work. As a result, they will always search for other greener pastures, as you have already mentioned, and we will be experiencing a large-scale migration of Sri Lankan people out of the country, which would in fact exacerbate the current shortage of skilled labor in the country. But in that context, I will have to mention here, Charita, even we are short of the unskilled labor in Sri Lanka today, specifically for the construction sector, and as a result we had to bring down people from countries like Nepal to fill the existing vacancies in the construction sector. And one important thing I have to mention is the labor culture is also not very conducive for people to continue with any kind of a construction work. For example, in the forthcoming Sinhala Tamil New Year period, most of the contractors have told me that they have to close down their workplaces for about 20 days, because the people after they go back to their villages, they won't return until early May. So because of these problems, we have a shortage of unskilled labor also. So if it is coupled up with the migration of the skilled labor, Sri Lanka will have a very big problem to sustain its future economic growth for lack of the necessary labor force.
Okay, Dr. Vijayawardena, now going forward, I know the picture looks gloomy. What would you like to see the government doing immediately? If there's any possibility to do some damage control, what would it be?
First of all, the government will have to take a very firm stand and completely eliminate this ethnic tension, ethnic and religious tension, and the government will have to create a situation where people of different faiths, different ethnicities can work together in harmony, number one. Government has to introduce the rule of law, and through that the property rights, so that people have faith in the government that their property should be protected. Number three is the immediately, even though they are facing an election, they have to introduce the major economic reforms like reform of the state sector enterprises, reform of the education, reform of health services, and the also reform of the government budget, because currently we are in a very temporary situation, because in 2016 government was able to increase revenue by extraordinary tax measures which are not repeatable. In 2018 we have a problem because we have to use the entirety of the government revenue to repay foreign loans. So government has to consolidate budgets, and that is the message given by IMF in recent press release.
When you were talking about budgets, I thought of something that the ADB had released yesterday. So the ADB is looking to hire private auditors, independent auditors, to audit projects that they are funding here, because there are delays in the Auditor General's department. Has this been a problem throughout?
No, it has been a problem because the Auditor General's department is understaffed, and also, Charita, the lowest salaries are paid to the audit officers in the Auditor General department. The government has not provided sufficient funding to improve the capacity of the Auditor General's department, and as a result they have to work under very strenuous conditions, and there's a long delays in auditing some of the important projects, and also the knowledge of the Auditor General department will have to be increased in order to audit these projects. That is why the ADB would have decided to hire private auditors, because the private auditors would work in accordance with the modern audit concepts of auditing a project.
Thank you, Dr. Wijewardena. Thank you for being with us. That's all the time we have for the discussion today. Chaturanga, it's over to you.
That's all the news we have for you tonight. You can look us up on Facebook by typing Biz1st Review 360. Good night and have a pleasant weekend.